Hi there, and welcome to episode 5 for Flip the Script Season 3, In the Weeds. My name is Becc. I'm going to be your guide for today's session. If you do me a favor before we jump into the content, this is a very, very meaty deck and concept. So if you go to flipthescript.co and click on the Free Sales Training Hub Season 3, this will be episode 5. And if you download the deck on the left-hand side to guide along with at each step of the way. And once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So this is going to be the agenda for today. So we're first going to cover what's a symptom and the 3 different types of symptoms. Second, we're going to go into what's a sign and the difference between that and a symptom and the 4 types of signs. Number 3, we're going to go into what's a pain and the 4 types of pains. And then what's a problem and the difference between a pain and a problem. And the 3 classes and 6 categories of problems. And then number 5, we're going to go into which 3 out of the 4 of these are dangerous to sell based on, which one is advantageous. And for that one, what are the 11 types, full disclosure, it's problems. The 11 types of problems that you will incur while you are selling. So full disclosure, it's going to be a very, very meaty session, but I hope at the end of this session that you'll walk away with a comprehensive way of how to prospect and sell better in general based on doing your prospect the most favors within the prospecting realm or sales floor. So let's go ahead and jump in. This is going to be very medical based as well with some sales tie and how you can do this alongside your prospect. So the first thing is a symptom. What is a symptom and what are the 3 types? So a symptom physically defined is basically something that's indicating a condition, that's happening to someone. So the sign of the existence usually of a negative condition. And what this usually is going to be, by and large, is going to be pain. So pain is the most common symptom. And this means it drives someone, if it's egregious enough or the impact of it is high enough, to inbound, very, very high likelihood. So people will come into the doctor's office mostly because of pain. People will inbound to evaluate your product, tool, or service, mostly because of a current pain-related symptom that they have. So you have 3 types of symptoms here. A chronic symptom, a remitting symptom, and a relapsing symptom. A chronic symptom is one that is ongoing, that happens very, very consistently. So typically, if you have a chronic symptom of pain, within your organization of it's really, really annoying. For instance, that I have my cell phone consistently loses charge. But essentially, if a symptom is chronic, the only time someone will move to do something about it is the impact is high enough or the pain has become so egregious that I'm now going to do something about it. So usually people are going to sell based on pain only and chronic symptoms only. And the reality is at the point where the impact is high enough, usually the prospect will have already made some type of move to do something about it. So this is how largely in part the sales industry is selling, is how do I try and get people to identify with some type of symptom, usually a painful symptom. And the reality is that you're really leaving things up, not to be too on theme here, but up to luck. Can I find the couple percentage of people who the pain is egregious enough, but they just haven't moved to do something yet? And that is how I'm outbounding. So chronic symptom is one that's ongoing, something that's typically happening within the prospect's day to day. A remitting symptom is one that they essentially got the pain to go away, that it's been resolved completely. And a relapsing symptom is one that they got to go away completely, but then came back. So if you are a seller and you sold something to someone and it got the symptom to go away short term, let's say, you were trying to solve for your team to be motivated. And so you hired a sales trainer for a 1-day SKO, for instance, to get your team motivated. What you'll typically find is your team got motivated for the next week to make some dials because they were really excited about that. But then long term, the symptom came back of them not wanting to make dials because they didn't have a plan to move forward. So this would be a condition or an example of a relapsing symptom. But essentially the difference between a symptom and a sign, a symptom is subjective, meaning it is typically pain-based and it's down to the feeling of your prospect and can be identified only by the prospect. Okay, so that's the definition of a symptom, is they have to be the one to notice it, and it's typically going to be pain-based and it's subjective in experience. So this is where your inbound line is ridden with people with symptoms. They have a symptom of a problem, they're not hitting quota, so they think that there's a problem with their outreach. You know, their AEs aren't building enough pipelines, so they think that there's a problem with that maybe the emails aren't working, or their reply rate is really, really low, and so they take it that means that their email quality is low. But this is how people are going to inbound. Typically, they're going to attribute the cause, or they're going to self-diagnose what the problem is, and most often they're going to be wrong in their self-diagnosis. So here, I would challenge that you need to challenge whether their self-diagnosis was correct. The second type of element within selling that you can use to your advantage, which I never see being used, I know never say never, but truly never, is what's called a sign. So sellers are wondering how they can be experts usually. The reality is you can be an expert in a multitude of ways, but the most predominant way is by telling them something that they don't know. So a sign, how it's going to differ from a symptom, is it's essentially something that an expert notices that they know means that someone has a condition or something negative happening to them, but that person doesn't know. So if there's no pain that is being caused currently by the condition, then typically people don't know the condition exists. So this is really where you can hallmark your expertise as a seller, is by being able to identify a problem for your prospects that they didn't even know was happening. So the reality is most people sell based on symptoms and pain. And people, if they're selling based on pain, your prospect's already aware that the pain exists. That's the definition of essentially pain, which we'll go into in a minute. So if they haven't moved to do something about it, it's usually because the impact isn't high enough, or because the pain isn't severe enough to where they have to do something about it. So a sign, so if you're selling based on that, you're essentially going to a pool of people who, by definition, have told you that the pain isn't big enough, and then you're trying to sell and get them to move based on that pain. If you're selling based on signs, this opens up a multitude of problems that your prospect didn't know about. So this will increase the likelihood that you can make a sale because they didn't know that they had the problem. So there's 4 types of signs, but basically this is something. This is a sign to an expert that there is a condition that's deeper that is not detected by the prospect. So there are 4 types of signs: diagnostic, prognostic, pathogenomic, and anamnestic. I'm not going to go into deep here. These are all very medical, but basically the signs for a diagnostic are signs that help you diagnose that someone currently has a condition. There are signs, prognostic signs are signs that point to a future condition or a future impact state that's going to happen for a current condition. Pathogenomic signs are ones that essentially with complete certainty can be linked to a condition. So a good example of pathogenomic would be, if someone's not hitting quota, then usually that's going to be a pathogenomic sign with 100% certainty that something needs to be improved within their day-to-day as a prospector. And then an anamnestic sign is basically, it's pointing to someone's past. So a good example of this from a medical perspective would be there's a scar for something, but for a sales perspective would be if someone just had massive layoffs of their sales team. It's something that's pointing to there was a condition in the past, that something was wrong on the sales team. They either weren't hitting quota, their emails are bad, maybe management's bad, on and on. But it's something that points to a previous condition that's likely to still be a current condition. So if I saw that a company had just laid off 100 salespeople, and it wasn't a market shift, then essentially I don't know if 6 months later if they still need some kind of sales training or consulting, but it's an arguably good place to start that there's something probably wrong with the pie 6 months ago, so there might be something wrong today. So a sign, and this is where you're going to clean up from a sales perspective, is because you're introducing problems to your prospects that they didn't know. So if you introduce a problem to your prospect that they didn't know, they believe typically that you have credibility and they trust you enough that if you were smart enough to know that this problem existed when they didn't even know that it existed, you likely have the expertise to be able to solve it for them effectively. I'll give you one example because I only have one in my career. There was a guy named Jay who reached out to me on a Friday night, and I extremely rarely respond to prospecting emails. Extremely rarely. And like I can think of them count on one hand. And he essentially reached out to me on a Friday night, and he said, "Hey, did you know that he said, big fan of the content. He said, did you know that if you Google your name and your website dead on, Google won't bring it up? I did some research and I believe it's because of your metadata on your website. I did some diagnosing with my engineer, and we believe it's these 3 things that you need to change. Would you give us 15, 30 minutes, to be able to unpack that?" I said, "What's your phone number?" And I called him on a Friday night and I said, "Thank you." I'm like, this is how selling should be. We are still friends to this day. He said, "Would you be willing to jump on a call to talk about it?" I'm like, "Dude, I'll give you the keys to my car. You just identified a problem that was hurting me that I didn't know about." So the number one thing I hear from CEOs is the type of person they want around them is not yes men or women. It's not people who challenge them. It's people who tell them things that they don't know. So I was watching a movie last night called The Setup. It's got Tay Diggs in it, and basically the setup is I'm trying to think. Lucy Liu is the female lead, and she essentially runs a company. She's like a very well-known sports editor, and she walks out on the floor with a bullhorn every single day, and she said, "Tell me something I don't know," to her entire team, because those are the things that are valuable to her, are the things that she doesn't know. So sign-based selling essentially is identifying things that are indicators to you that there's a condition, but they wouldn't know that there's a condition. So a great example of this, which we'll get into a little bit later, is I ask people, "Hey, what are you saying is a qualified meeting? Is it a BANT, criteria? Is it need, timeline, authority, budget, etc.? Are you asking that to prospects on the inbound line?" They'll answer yes. I know that that's a sign that they're likely churning a lot of users in the process, but they don't know that that's a sign. So this is where you really can help your prospects. Now let's go into a pain and the 4 types of pain. So a pain is basically just something negative that's negative suffering in the moment. So it's something that's causing trouble, concern, worry, etc., but it's current state that's happening. So there are 4 types of pains, and then we're going to go into how that differs from pain and problem differ. There's pain as a symptom, pain as a problem, pain as an impact, and pain as just an annoyance. So pain as a symptom is essentially something that your prospect is feeling, and they're noticing that that is either linking to a deeper condition or that's the thing that they want to solve themselves. So typically within pain as a symptom, when people are trying to solve the problem, what they're trying to solve for is that pain, that current state pain, is alleviated. Pain as a problem means that you have a negative impact in the present, and you are now making the move to solve it or solve for it to be alleviated. So the difference between a pain and a problem, all pains aren't problems and all problems aren't painful. So all pains aren't problems in that if a pain is, a pain in the butt, so to speak, something is a low amount of level of pain, but it's not a high enough level to where you want to solve for it, it's not a problem. A problem is only initiated whenever you want to or need to solve for that item. So if there's something, great example being my phone loses charge quite a bit. So is that annoying? Is that painful? Yes. Like I'll be on runs all the time and I'll have to plug it into a remote charger, but it's not a problem because I haven't decided to solve for it. The impact isn't big enough. It's not happening enough. And I have a remote charger that I can just carry along while I'm running. Is it annoying that I have to keep the remote charger in my pocket? Yes. But the pain is not egregious enough to where I want to solve for it. So pain is not necessarily a problem, even when it's annoying to your prospect. Pain as an impact. Sometimes pain can be the impact of something, a deeper condition happening. So let's say that that there is some type of problem that has gone unsolved, and as an impact of that problem not being solved, the person will incur pain. So a great example of, we're going to go into problems in a second, but there are some problems that are just neutral problems of you're trying to stack things in a certain criteria to hit a metric or a goal. Pain as an impact would be, if I don't hit that goal, I will incur pain. So there's a difference between negative problems and neutral problems. We're going to go into it in a minute, but let's think of it like a math problem. Solve for y. If I don't solve for y, then essentially I'm going to get the negative impact of I'm going to get that question wrong, and maybe I'll fail my test and I won't be able to play soccer because I failed that test, and I'm DQ'd, because I didn't pass. But that's pain as an impact. So there is no current negative pain. What you're trying to solve for from a problem perspective is so that you don't incur pain. So pain is an impact. You'll see this in threat-based problems a lot, which we're going to go into. But essentially, pain as an impact is if you don't solve for something correctly, that's when you'll incur the pain. So pain is a symptom as they notice it. They're coming in usually to solve, to alleviate it. Pain as a problem is essentially whenever you make the move that you're like, the pain or the impact is egregious enough that I want to solve for the problem, or I want to solve to alleviate it, then it becomes a problem. Pain as an impact is if you don't solve a current problem, that the impact is going to be painful. And then pain as annoyance is basically it's something that the pain is too low to where you want to solve for it. So it only becomes a problem again if I want or need to solve for it. And that is going to be up to the person in the chair. So a lot of times people will say, like, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. And they're correct in saying that. So until the person wants to solve for it or needs to solve for it, it doesn't matter how big the pain is. It matters that they want to be in the chair to solve for it, even if the pain is small, but the person wants or needs to solve for it. And they say, like, I want to solve for this thing just for some outside reasons. Then all of a sudden, then it has become a problem. I'll make a sale in that perspective because they've decided that they want to solve for it based on impact or, based on a multitude of criteria. But again, the difference between pain and problem is a pain's negative in nature and the impact is happening currently, and it's happening currently, or you're trying to potentially not run into the pain if it's pain as an impact. So it's something negative that will happen either in the current state or potentially in the future state if they don't solve a problem. So now let's go into problem. This is the biggest category. I'm very, very excited for this. I can't tell if I don't know if you can tell, but there are 3 different classes of problems, 6 different categories of problems, and 11 different types of problems. So first, let's start with what's a problem. There are really 3 classes of problems. So the definition is here. A problem is something that has to be solved, or an unpleasant or undesirable condition that needs to be corrected. There's 2 definitions. So typically within selling, we're always thinking about the latter, the unpleasant or undesirable conditions. But there's some types of problems that need to be solved for in the present to avoid an impact in the future. So a problem is only instigated when someone wants or needs to solve or solve for it. That's the definition. So for today's sake, something that the prospect wants or needs to solve or solve for. So let's jump in. There are 3 classes of problems that I would attribute. So you have negative problems to solve, neutral problems to solve for, and positive problems to solve for. So let's start with class 1. A negative problem is going to be a set of conditions that needs to be solved, and it has negative impacts. So we're going to go into current state and future state for both of these, but essentially the impact from the problem is a negative impact. The second type of problem is going to be class of problem is going to be a neutral problem. So this is a set of conditions that need to be solved for to prevent an impact from happening. So think of essentially in this case scenario, this is a math problem. This is a question that you are being asked, and you need to solve for that question to avoid a negative impact if you get the answer wrong. So just like on a calculus test, someone, solves for y. They don't solve y, they solve for y. And if they get that answer wrong, then they have the negative impact of they fail their test, they can't graduate or whatever it is. Same thing with your prospects. They are in some conditions, they don't have a current negative impact, or they're not trying to avoid a potential threat of a negative impact. They're trying to solve for what are the ways that I can stack things up in my current state that will help me achieve a goal. Now, if I don't get that goal right, if I don't stack things up in a way that I hit quota attainment, etc., then I will incur a negative impact. But in the current state, there is no impact. I'm solving for something just like a math problem. And then the last type of problem is going to be a positive problem. So this is a type of problem that you are solving for to inherit positive impact. So you're going to already, I think that you're probably already guessing if you're watching this, which types of problems that people are going to solve for in what order. Usually they're going to go for negative problems first, then they're going to go for neutral problems, and then they're going to go for positive problems for the upside. But again, the difference between a pain and a problem is a pain is something negative, and a problem is only something that needs to be solved or solved for. So all pains aren't problem, and that it's annoying that my phone it doesn't charge very well, but it's not a problem because I haven't decided to solve for it because the impact isn't egregious enough. I have a couple of their options. Doesn't annoy me that it's not that bad to me. So it's not a problem because I'm not solving for it. All problems are not pain because some of them are neutral problems or positive problems. I'm solving for something to inherit a positive impact. So some pains are problems, some things that are painful people will solve for, and some problems are painful, meaning I'm solving the problem of, my eyes are watering and I'm sick and I have these conditions, or my toe hurts. When I come into the doctor, that's essentially what I'm solving for. But they aren't necessarily pain is not a problem, and a problem is not necessarily painful. So class 1, there are 6 different categories, 2 categories for each class of problem. So current state and future state. So let's dive in. So category 1 and 2 is going to be under class 1. So class 1 as a review are going to be negative problems. So current-based negative problems are a condition that exists in the present state that's having an actual negative impact to them currently and will continue to do so if not solved. So this is most of the pain-based problems, is there's a negative impact happening to me right now. So the problem I need to solve is to alleviate what's happening to me right now. Category 2 is going to be a set of conditions that happen in the present that will potentially have a negative impact to me in the future if I don't solve for something successfully. So this is going to be threat-based problems a lot. So people still have urgency to buy here of I'm afraid that my competitors will take me over in the future if I don't learn how to sell better today because of these indicators. But it's basically they're trying to avoid a potential threat that's happening in the future that they're not sure will happen. And they're solving for that in the current state because they want to avoid that potential threat from coming true. Class 2 are neutral problems. So this is a type of problem that you're trying to solve for, and you're trying to solve for because of a current state event or a future state event. And the reason you're trying to do this is so that you can solve for the problem and avoid any kind of impact at all. You don't know if there will be a negative impact or what level there will be, but essentially this is a set of conditions. There is no negative impact currently that you're trying to solve for or rearrange things in the present to achieve a goal. So the first type of category under this, which is category 3, is a goal or a metric or event in the present case scenario that needs to be solved for. So this would be, let's say I have the quota of 25 meetings per quarter. So that's a current metric that I need to rearrange things in my current state, whether that be, the amount of calls that I think my rep should be making. Is it calls? Is it email? What's the quality of them? What time should they be doing it? But I'm trying to arrange things in the current state to solve for the condition coming true that I currently have, that I hit my quota. So that's something current state that exists, a goal or a metric that exists currently. And I'm trying to rearrange things within my current state to achieve that metric that exists in the present. Category 4, which is going to be the second type of neutral problem, is a goal or a metric that will, without doubt, happen in the future, that if I don't solve for it, I will potentially have a negative impact. So a great example is I have a metric that is going to be issued in, let's say, Q4. And my current metric is 10 meetings per month, but in Q4, a future negative, or in Q4, they're going to issue in a 15 meeting quota. I have 10 in the present, 15 in the future. And I'm positive that that is going to happen, or we're going to IPO, in 3 months from now. So currently, my things are arranged to where my team is hitting 10 meetings and hitting the quota because of it. But I know that in Q4, my quota is going to be issued up to 15. So I, in my current state, need to start rearranging things to be able to achieve 15 meetings today, not because I want to inherit the positive upside of exceeding quota, but because when Q4 comes into place, I need to be able to hit that metric. So you can't do it all on the spot. So I need to solve for it today. So the difference between a future-based neutral problem and a future-based negative problem is, in the future-based negative problem, I'm trying to avoid something that I think will potentially come true if I don't solve for it in the present. A future-based neutral problem is, I know a set of conditions or condition or event or goal or metric will happen in the future. And so I need to rearrange things in my current state to achieve that metric in the future so that I don't inherit a negative impact if I don't solve for it. So both of these types, you are solving for it, not solving it. And you're solving for a metric being achieved, a goal being acquired or achieved, or an event, or the stacking indicators that would lead to an event going off without a hitch. Class 3, this is going to be positive problems. And what I mean by that is there's a positive impact that is involved. So category 5 is going to be an opportunity that exists in the present that will have a positive impact if I solve for it successfully. So a great example of this would be, I'm hitting quota, but I want to exceed quota because I understand that I'm hitting quota only because my cold calls are great. But if it started increasing the quality of my emails, I would exceed quota. So this is markered by positive impacts are markered by their current metric, whatever it is per persona. If it's ENPS score for HR professionals, if it's, NPS score for customer success reps, if it's, overall revenue for a CRO, if it's, whatever, quota attainment for a sales reps, MQL for a marketer, time to first deal for a sales enablement, a professional, their current metric, their main metrics are alleviated. They're hit. A positive impact is outside of that or in relation to that. They're either increasing against their main metric, or they get a positive other upside opportunity in tandem. So current-based positive metric is an opportunity that exists in the present, that they know that if they achieve this, that they can get a positive opportunity. And a future-based positive problem is an opportunity that exists in the future that will have a potential positive impact if they can do it correctly. So you have one that's current state that they would get a positive impact, one that's future state that they might get if they rearrange and solve for the problem successfully. So really the one in the current state is going to be known. The one in the future state is going to be unknown, but they think that they can incur it if they go ahead and rearrange things in the present. So those are the three classes of problems and 6 categories of problems. So again, in review, the 3 classes are negative, neutral, and positive. The 6 categories are underneath each class of problem. We have negative current-based negative problems, future-based negative problems, current-based neutral problems, future-based neutral problems, current-based positive problems, future-based neutral positive problems. But apart from those, I want to go into which 3 out of symptom, sign, pain, and problem, which 3 are dangerous to sell based on. Strictly, if you're selling based on that in isolation, and which one will always do you the most favors. I think you're already getting a hint on which one it is. And then we're going to transition into the 11 types of this type of thing. So the impact of selling, and I'm probably going to get lit up for this, but I'm prepped for it. I did my push-ups. The impact of selling strictly based on pain is 2 things that could be negative, that probably are negative for you and your prospects. If I sell based on pain only, then I'm asking someone a certain amount of questions. What hurts? How long has that thing been hurting? What are the impacts of that hurting? But the first piece is I am not essentially, after those pain questions, going into any kind of questions that would help me diagnose what is causing the pain. So pain-based selling is strictly to some degree, emotionally manipulate the buyer to get them to talk about the pain more so they believe that they need the medication more. The 2 things that I'm leaving on the table if I'm selling strictly based on pain is, number 1, giving them the due diligence of what is causing that pain. So if I only know that they have a pain and I don't know what's causing it, I can't alleviate it. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, even if you just have the goal of, I want to blow out my numbers, highlighting things for people that they don't know is going to be the fastest way to do it. If nothing else, from a cohort perspective. If you're selling based on pain, pain is defined as they already know about it. So if they already know about it and they haven't done something about it yet, it's usually going to be because it wasn't big enough or the impact of it wasn't big enough. So you're essentially leaving your numbers up to luck that you're going to call into the person who does have a pain that's big enough, but just hasn't quite got around to inbounding. So in both case scenarios, you're not helping your prospect because you're not diagnosing what's causing it, so you can't effectively solve for it. Feels a little icky on a side note, feels a little, emotionally manipulative. And then the other piece is essentially from a pipeline perspective, if you aren't talking about things that they don't know, that's where you drive your value. That's where you teach them things that they will thank you for. So that guy, Jay, who did that, and the reason I only have one story about it, that's the only time in my career that it's ever happened. And I inherently, within seconds, said, I want to call you. Thank you for doing that. So you are leaving a lot of meat on the bone if you're only talking about things that they know. So I'll close this segment with this. I once heard from a very pain-based seller, or once saw a quote from a very famous pain-based seller, that sales is a Broadway play put on by a psychologist. And I heard that, and I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And it sure as hell shouldn't be. Because first of all, it should not be a play. It's not a performance. You're not acting in a certain way. It's a 2-way street where you need to be. It's like saying that a doctor is putting on a play. No, they're not. They need to know information to diagnose the thing appropriately so they can solve the problem as an earnest medical professional. The second piece is they said put on by a psychiatrist, which means that they're going to emotionally manipulate you into a spot. They're going to run this through your brain. They're going to act in a certain way that's Broadway caliber to, from a psychology view, manipulate you enough to where you believe that you need it when I don't know if you need it because I haven't asked you any questions. And this is the most modern type of selling. This is why salespeople have a bad name. We should not be after emotionally manipulating them. We should be after helping them uncover a problem that they didn't know they have, or a solution to problems in general, an impact that they weren't aware of, or a root cause of a problem to help our buyers. Our buyers are ready to be helped. So are we going to do the hard work to help them? Then you don't have to worry about techniques or psychologically manipulating them. And if that is the goal, then I think that the sales reputation is accurate, and I don't think it should change. So this is the impact of selling based on pain, strictly standalone. Second, impact of selling based on symptoms, very similar to pain. It's manipulative. And the other piece that comes into mind is you're only basing off of problems that the buyer highlights to you. So if you're not selling based on signs, then you're waiting around for your patients to come in your office to say something hurts as the only cohort of people that you're able to sell to. If you're selling based on signs, this is a step in the better direction. You're talking about problems that they don't know that they have, but you're still leaving on the table any kind of symptom-based pain of, I want to talk to inbound leads, for instance. These are outbound sellers a lot of time of like, I want to identify the conditions, but you also are leaving on out any kind of neutral problem they can solve for. Again, this sign-based selling is for a negative condition, right? Something that's hurting them in the present. But there's a lot of neutral-based problems, meaning activity metrics, metrics, goals, or events that are currently happening to them that they need to solve to stack up to hit. Otherwise, they will incur a negative problem that you would leave off the table if you're only sign-based selling. So the only type of selling that, from my perspective, that does your buyer any good and really has their back, you can leave out the techniques, is problem-centric selling. So there's 11 types of problems that I'm going to bridge into that are the types of problems that you'll see in selling the most often. So before I even go on about this on a rant, I don't want to cover up his face, but this is all based on the work and inspired by Keenan. Keenan wrote a book called Gap Selling, and I've gotten the wonderful chance to collaborate with him on a number of different occasions. And I would, first of all, encourage anyone to read Gap Selling. If you have not read Gap Selling, it's a monumental book. And what Keenan understood, and I told him this, and I don't think he knew how to respond, Keenan understood something that has never been understood in sales. And that was that pain was only a piece of it. And that buyers buy based on problems that they're running into. So this opened up my world. It took about a year for him to unpack it in a way to which my tiny brain could understand. But problem-centric selling is selling according to the problems that your buyer is likely trying to solve and uncovering the impacts of those and the root causes of those so that you can solve your buyer's problems. Now, from a selling perspective, I will say, full disclosure, this is much quote unquote harder than every other type of selling. But what is not harder is that you're truly solving your buyer's problems. And you also are incurring the uptick of you're making more sales because of it. So from that perspective, it's the hardest short-term solution and the most easy and beneficial and breezy and you feel good at night long-term solution is problem-centric selling. So he understood something that, from my perspective, no one has understood in sales before, and that is that buyers buy based on problems, not necessarily and strictly based on pain. So I did want to say that this was all inspired by his work, and this essentially, the next 11 problems are my take or my view on his work that he impacted in gap selling. So if you haven't read that book, I would definitely give it a read. So the first question I'm asking is, what needs to be solved to identify what type of problem this is? So the first type of problem is going to be a symptom-based problem. So a symptom-based problem, it's pretty straightforward, and I put a flip the script example in here. It's a problem whereby the issue the prospect wants to solve is a symptom, meaning it's subjective, it's something that's happened to them, and typically it's going to be based on pain. So they came into the office, they came to you because they haven't hit quota, for instance, is probably what I said. Yeah, prospect to inbounds, and they want to drive more quota attainment because they haven't hit their quota over the last 3 months. So it's a symptom, it's usually pain-based, and what they're solving for, if you will, is to alleviate the pain in the present. So they aren't hitting quota. They want to solve that they want to hit quota so that they discontinue the negative impact that's happening to them presently. So the type of impact that would happen to them if it goes unsolved is that the pain and the symptoms persist if the problem remains unsolved, and typically with an increased level of aggression dependent on how long the problem has been going on. So usually problems are going to get worse, not better. But the problems would persist if they don't solve for it. So what they're solving for is to alleviate the pain. I come into the doctor's office because my head hurts and I'm trying to get that to go away. So it's typically a negative problem. It can be either qualitative or quantitative or both, and a very high likelihood of inbounding. Typically, this is going to be someone who self-identifies, by definition, so they're going to come inbound. The second type of problem, and this is category 1 or 2, meaning it's usually a negative problem in the current or the future, is going to be a sign-based problem. So a sign-based problem is essentially a problem whereby the issue comes about when an outside expert notices, based on a certain amount of signs, that the prospect didn't know means that they have a deeper condition, but I know as the outside expert that likely means that they have a condition that needs to be confirmed. So a great example of this is I asked a prospect what qualification criteria they're using for a meeting to become an SQL. The prospect responds, we're using BANT criteria, and we're making our SDRs ask BANT questions to our prospects even when they're coming inbound. I know that that's a sign that, number one, they're dragging their prospects through the mud. Another topic for another time. There's another episode in here, I believe it's 15, that's BANT is a sales 4-letter word. Point being, I know that that's a sign that they're probably incurring churn and a negative perception on their brand because of it. They don't know that that's happening though. So I'm asking that question to understand, do they likely have a condition based on this sign, but they don't know that that's a sign of a deeper condition. So what they're trying to solve for in this case scenario, once they are aware that they have a problem, so again, they wouldn't have known, you make them aware, and then what they're solving for in that instance is to remedy the problem from existing, stop it from spreading if they can't remedy the problem, or in terms of impact or across level of aggression across the org, and hopefully to prevent it from coming back in the future. So the type of impact they would see is essentially usually the problem would persist. There are no symptoms at this point, but there probably would be later, and usually they get more deadly or aggressive the longer you let the problem go on. So the type of impact would usually be over time, and it's going to get more aggressive. And the type of, it's a very negative type of problem. It's typically quantitative, and the likelihood of inbounding, I want you to notice this, very negative problem, the likelihood of inbounding is low. Why? Because they don't know about it. This is the type of problem that if you highlight for your prospects, you have instant credibility with them because they didn't know about it and it's something that's negative. This is where you can really, really, really help your prospects and murder your numbers because of it, is making them aware of negative problems they're incurring in the present that they didn't know about. Threat-based problems. This is going to be category 2, meaning it's a future-based negative problem. A threat-based problem essentially is a problem that they want to solve for, so to speak, that comes as a result of the prospect having a perceived threat of something that's going to happen in the future. So this is something that they believe is going to happen if they don't change their present case scenario. And usually this is going to be a very high likelihood that people are going to be hungry to have some level of purchase. So the flip the script example is, and keep in mind, these were all real examples for me. A prospect comes in and they essentially want to improve their team's skill set, cold calls, discovery, etc. And they want to do this because in this case scenario, excuse me, they believed that if they didn't improve their current state, they didn't improve the way that they were selling, that their competitor was going to start winning deals. Now, they weren't positive that that was going to happen, but they believed their market share was going to dip down because their competitors were aggressively starting to hire and aggressively starting to skill up. So they didn't know if that threat would come true, but it was enough, and the impact was enough that they said, we want to solve for in the present. So what you're solving for in this case scenario is to change the current state in a way that helps avoid the potential threat from coming true. So that is the hallmark of you did a good job. So the reality is kind of the kick. I'm looking for another idiom to say, but the thing that kind of stinks is you won't ever know if it was because of the work you did or because it was never going to come true to begin with. But this essentially is a type of problem where someone's trying to avoid a potential threat that they believe to be is going to happen if they don't solve for it in the present. And the impact of not solving this problem is that the potential threat, it does come true in the future. So that becomes a reality for them if you don't solve for it appropriately. This is negative. It can be qualitative or quantitative, and the likelihood of this inbounding is very high. The fourth type of problem is going to be a future metric-based problem. This is category 4. So this is something that's going to be a metric that issues in the future, and you are positive that it's going to issue in. So definition, problem comes in as a result of a future metric's going to go into place that's going that the prospect needs to make a plan to achieve that metric that they know will happen in the future. So the difference between this and a threat is a threat you're not positive if it will become true. A metric future metric you are positive. So this type of problem, their current state way of doing business is just fine according to their current metrics. But the metric that's going to be issued in the future makes their current state a problem that they need to solve for because their current state is not going to be able to achieve the future metric that's going to come into place. So a great example of this, a number of deals come to mind, but basically an SDR is hitting their numbers currently. And with all great sales leaders and reps, oftentimes if they hit their metric too aggressively and too early, leadership says, well, the metric must be too low. So they crank it up and the SDR has to adhere to that type of metric. So teaching the wrong things to someone for performing, but another topic for another time. So the new quota is going to be issued in Q3. It's Q2 right now. They're at 110% of quota right now, but the Q3 metric is going to be much higher. And so their current state results is only going to be 60% of the new metric. So they know they have to change their skill level, change something about their current state in a way that's going to realize their future metric whenever it is issued in. So what they're solving for is to change their current state in a way that yields the future metric results within their current state so that when the future metric is issued in, they're able to achieve that. So the impact of not solving the problem is pretty simple, that when the future metric comes in, they aren't able to hit it and they'll suffer a negative impact because of it. And this is a neutral problem, slightly negative. If I had to argue one way or the other, it's typically going to be quantitative, and it's likelihood of this inbounding is high. Problem number 5, future event-based problems. This is category 4. So essentially, this is something that is a neutral problem to solve for, where the impact, it's a future metric or future metric or event or goal that will be issued in that you're positive of, that you need to solve for in the present to avoid an impact from happening. So this is a problem that you have a future event that is 100% going to happen, that leads the prospect to believe that there potentially might be a negative impact if they stay as is. So very similar to a future metric. It's just that this is a future event that's going to happen that makes their current state untenable. So a great example is, I actually was given this by Keenan himself, so shout out to him if he's watching. But there was a deal that he was in where it was all insurance sellers, and they had a mandate that was put upon people that they mandatorily had to have insurance, car insurance. And that mandate was being lifted, so this company reaches out to him and says, like, we're scared that once that future event happens, that people, because they don't have to buy insurance, they won't buy insurance, or sellers need to upskill. So in this case scenario, this is an event that's going to happen in the future. They're positive it's going to happen. It's not a potential threat. It's a realized event that will happen that could potentially cause a negative impact if they don't solve for it in the present. So what they're solving for is essentially to change their current state in a way that turns them into an ideal current state that they believe is the requirement for them to be able to have the standard that the future event requires, so they can avoid the negative perceived impact that would happen if they don't have the current state that is in the ideal state that the event requires. So type of impact of not solving a problem is the potential negative impact that would happen if their current state remains as is realized. And this is going to be a slightly negative problem, both qualitative or quantitative, and it is high likelihood of inbounding. So this is problem number 6. This is a prescription-based problem. So this can be, it's kind of a fun niche problem. I don't know if problems can be fun, but category 1 or 2, meaning this is either a current or future negative problem. And a prescription problem is essentially a problem that the person knew that they had, tried to solve for with somebody or something else. That didn't work, and so now they're back at the initial problem because the prescription did not suffice, or the original person identified the problem incorrectly that they needed to solve for. So this is where, again, your prospect has a problem, they tried to solve for it, it didn't work. So a great example is, I hope this is not shots fired, but SDR leader came in, they recently purchased sales training, they wanted to lift a pipeline problem, they were at 50% of quota, they bought another sales trainer methodology, and they didn't see an increase at all in pipeline. So again, they tried to solve the problem through something else, and for whatever reason, it didn't incur the reality that they wanted. So what they're solving for is that the original problem that they have is solved, obviously, through different means. So it's either the prescription needs to change, it wasn't the right prescribed plan or tools, or the original problem was misidentified of what you're solving for. So this is often what I see it being in my day-to-day, is it wasn't that the, whatever it is, sales training wasn't good. It was that it was cold call training, and really where they needed help was email, or maybe it was getting their prospects sequence fast enough, or, their lead routing is off, et cetera. And so training wasn't, cold emails wasn't the problem. So the original problem is one that needs to be solved, and the impact of not solving the problem is the current pains persist, and this is usually going to be with a very increased level of aggression. So in this case scenario, the leader has put their name on the line, so to speak. They thought that this was the solution for the thing. And even though it wasn't them that didn't perform, it essentially was because it was their decision. So you'll see leaders in this case scenario, now they're having to double down to solve the original problem. So they're a little bit more frustrated, so to speak. And they're a little more hesitant in some case scenarios because they tried to solve it before and it didn't work. So this is a negative problem for sure. Can be both qualitative or quantitative. and the likelihood of inbounding is very high and high. So when they do come inbound, usually they're in a not panic, so to speak, but they have a very egregious problem if they're having to try to solve for it twice. Number 7, this is a lateral-based problem. Lateral-based problem, essentially, probably one of my favorite types of problem. This can be category 1 or 2, so it's either a current or future-based negative problem. And this is a problem that happens as a result of someone had a problem, they were given a solution, the solution worked, solved the problem, yay for us, but it caused a new one. Caused a fresh hell for them to address. So a great example of this is I talked to a VP of sales. They wanted to get sales training to increase pipeline. The SDRs were roughly 60% of quota. And essentially the VP of sales said, so I got the sales training and it did increase the pipeline to some degree. But what happened is my AEs stopped self-prospecting because the SDR started sending them more meetings. So even though the SDRs started increasing in their output, because the AEs weren't trained as well, the AEs stopped self-prospecting. There was no accountability there. So net, my total of pipeline actually went down because the AEs stopped. So this is a lateral problem. It does solve the initial problem, but it creates a new one for them based on that solution. So what they're trying to solve for is either to eradicate the side effect, or best case scenario, to solve the original problem without causing a side effect at all. So the impact of this is the problem persists, side effects persist, usually with increased level of aggression dependent upon the side effect. This can be both negative, both quantitative or qualitative, and very high likelihood of inbounding, but it can be dependent on the level, the severity, the impact, etc. of the side effect that happened from the first solution being put in place. Number 8, we got 4 more. Number 8, if you want to take a break, that's completely okay. Number 8 is going to be a goal-based problem. And goal-based problem is going to be category 3, which is a neutral current problem. So this is something you are solving for. You are solving for why, arranging things in your current state to achieve something. And a goal-based problem is essentially there's some type of goal, either that's a metric or something in their current state that they need to achieve in their current state to achieve that metric. So flip the script example would be there is no negative impact currently. There's no negative impact that they're afraid of. But the SDR leader is, let's say they're building a program from the ground up. They don't have anyone in place. They have a metric that's currently issued in, and they're hiring people. And they know that a piece of that is that their SDRs likely need to be trained in terms of sales training. So what they're trying to solve for in their case, not solve, is how do I arrange things within my current state to achieve a metric? Now, if they don't hit that metric, then the negative impact will probably come into place. Of like they didn't solve for the thing, and so now they're gonna have to incur, maybe a PIP or maybe a churn of the leader. But this is what they're solving for, is arranging the things in the current state to achieve the metric that's going to happen, or the metric that they currently have in place. The impact of not solving this is they're probably going to suffer a negative impact because they didn't hit the goal. But what they're solving for is how do I arrange things in my current state to achieve that metric? So slightly negative, but to neutral, typically quantitative, and it's going to be a medium level of inbounding simply because there isn't a current negative impact. Amelioration-based problems. So this is problem number 9, and we're going to transition off into positive problems now. So positive problems are, as a reminder, going to be a problem that you're trying to solve for to inherit a positive impact. So this is going to be more pleasure-based than pain. So usually you're going to see a decline tenacity here, but it depends on the level of the upside. So an amelioration-based problem, essentially to ameliorate, before you think I made up words, is to make something better. So the amelioration problem is there's something that's happening currently that the leader, they're achieving their metrics, whatever those metrics and KPIs are, but there's something in their day that they're like, it just bugs me. It bugs me that it's not good. So I'll give you an example. I was working at a company and I was running the SDR team, and we weren't accredited inbound leads, meaning we didn't get credit whenever they booked meetings. But I noticed that the inbound process was just clunky. It took 7 different steps. You couldn't schedule on the site. I got, the theory that essentially we need to qualify and whatever, but it just really bothered me. So I wanted to improve the current state, the inbound process, even though my metric had nothing to do with the inbound line. So I was responsible for running the outbound engine. But I noticed because of this inbound thing, because of this inbound process, I'm like, I bet we're incurring some negative impacts because of this. I bet we're incurring some churn or whatever. But really what I was trying to solve for is it was just clunky and it was bothering me and I wanted to make it better. I actually see this quite a bit in sales training. So the example I gave here is SDR leader is hitting their current KPIs. So this is markered again by their primary KPI is being exceeded or hit. But there's something that just bothers them, that they just want to make better. This, I would argue, is the marquee. I like how I give a story and then I'm like, this is a good leader. This is a marquee of a good leader, of even if they are hitting their metric, that they're always trying to push the needle and become 1% better. So what they're solving for is to improve whatever it is in their current state that they think is bad into something that they think is better. So what's really, really important here, especially from the selling proclivity, is that you understand what bad means. What do they not like about it? What do they want to stop seeing? And what does better mean? What is the acceptable evidence that they would take as this is currently better? So with an email outreach, for instance, maybe it's they're too long. Maybe it's not, they're not personalized enough. Maybe it's they're not talking about the true problems their buyers need to solve. But I would need to be after what are the things that they think are bad and what is the acceptable evidence to them that they would say is better, because this is a very subjective type of problem that I see quite frequently. So that I understand what I'm solving for, essentially. So what I'm trying to solve for is to make the bad things better, and the impact of that not happening is basically a prospect remains bothered by this currently happening, and they wonder, is there a potential negative impact that I'm incurring because of this process? But they don't know. That's not why they're solving for it. They're solving for it because it just bothers them in the present that this thing is not quality. So type of problem is neutral to slightly positive, typically qualitative and medium to high. But this essentially is someone is currently hitting their primary metric, but wants to make their reality better just because. Number 10, and then we have 11 and we'll close out. 10 is an opportunity-based problem. So this is category 5 or 6, meaning it's a positive problem. Either in the current or the future that will potentially happen in the future. Typically, it's going to be 5, meaning they have a current opportunity in front of them. An opportunity-based problem is essentially a problem that comes as a result of they think there's a current opportunity that they will realize if they change their current state or way of doing things. So again, in this type of example, with any positive problems, it's usually based on their metrics are being achieved, but they either see a positive opportunity in relation to their metric of like some upside of excelling of whatever their metric is, or they see another tangential positive opportunity that's tangential to their current primary metric. So the flipped script example is an SDR team is hitting quota currently, exceeding their targets. This is a true example that happened about a month ago. The SDR team was hitting their current quota. And but when I did some diagnosing, I'm like, okay, so how are they hitting their current quota? And they were hitting everything over cold call. So I said, what's your email activity metric? He said 100. I said, per day? He said, yes. And I'm like, well, I know part of your problem, I think, in terms of quality, but, is what I'm thinking in my head. I didn't say that out loud, but I said, so let me get this straight. You want to solve for, you're currently hitting quota. But if you could get 1 or 2 meetings or email, that'd be even better gravy. Like you're hitting your quota, but then you could really excel. And he said, exactly. So we're alleviated in terms of our quota is just fine. But if we could get that upside, over email and improve our email quality, we could get even more meetings on top of that. So what you're solving for is to change or rearrange your current state in a way that helps the person at hand or prospect realize the potential opportunity. And the impact of not solving for this isn't big. it essentially, isn't big dependent on the size of opportunity, but it means that they don't obtain the opportunity and they don't realize the positive impact from whatever it is. So it's, again, the level of severity is going to be that they feel like they got FOMO or they missed out on a big opportunity, but it's not going to have deleterious effects to them within their current role because it wasn't a negative impact they were trying to avoid or neutral problem they were trying to solve. It was to inherit an opportunity. So the impact would be that they just didn't realize the opportunity or obtain it. It's going to be a positive problem, both qualitative or quantitative, and the likelihood of inbounding is going to be high. And then the last type of problem, drumroll please, is a success-based problem. So this is mo money, mo problems. They just achieved some success, but it issued in a problem that they need to solve for. So this can be category 1 through 6, a 6 on what the problem is. Sometimes it's a negative problem, sometimes it's a neutral, and sometimes it's a positive, but it's a problem that is hallmarked by it is based on the success according to the metric that you are trying to drive. So it's a problem to solve for that comes as a result of success. This is a direct result of the prospect's main primary metric being achieved to an overexhaustive degree. The flip the script example would be a marketing team is successful in generating a lot of MQLs, a lot of demo requests, and because of that, this is a true case scenario. You want to send this leader hate mail probably, but they had so many demo requests that they didn't have the headcount to cover it. They were like, look, they had, I think 20 people trying to cover it. And they're like, we can't set that many demos. So they're like, we tried to slow down our inbound process or make it hard to request a demo because we were getting so much inbound. Mo money, mo problems, right? Want to be good to be them. So they were coming to me, trying to evaluate me as a consultant of, is there a process that we can put in that requires less headcount to process more demos? By the way, if you're interested in anything like that, I do an episode on why BANT is BANT being the 4-letter sales word. I think it's in episode 15 or somewhere in there of this season. Essentially for a process to do that more quickly. But point being, they wanted a process to translate more demo requests because they knew that they were given the amount of demo requests that they had, they weren't being good stewards. Now they were successful against their metric, but they were leaving so much on the table. So what they're solving for is to solve the problem the prospect is occurring as a result of the current success. And the impact is either, it depends on what type of problem it is, but it's lost opportunity. And usually it's the emotional impact of feeling like they're not being a good steward with the opportunity in front of them. So they're having all of this surplus. So how do I be a good steward with that surplus? So positive, both qualitative or quantitative depends, and medium to high likelihood of inbounding. So in summary, I know that there is a lot of different definitions out there. There's a lot of different pain, a lot of different symptoms, but where you can really double down for your prospects, where you really can have their back, is by understanding problems they're trying to solve, problems that they don't know about, and the correct prescription that can, a prescribed plan or prescribed products that can really solve those problems. So I could not agree with Keenan more. I would read gap selling, but problem-centric selling is a way to really have your buyers back, solve problems for them in the current that will make them thank you as a result of it. And on a side note, it makes you feel better as a seller that you made your prospect, you put them in a different spot intentionally by solving their problems than they were before they ran into you. So you're not selling anything, you're really solving their problems for a living, which makes selling a super, super fun integrity-driven craft to be able to be a part of. So that is everything. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this session, you want to hear more, we have a bunch of different sessions on everything related to sales, from tactical to KPI systems to process. If you go to flipthescript.co, and all you have to do is enter your email address, and it's all for free, and you can see a lot more sessions. But other than that, I appreciate you tuning in today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.